Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I am AmalgamAsh, and today I want to talk about one of my favorite video games of all time, as well as a video game very close to that game. Here I am. I look kind of like crap. My hair is unkempt. My face has quickly regenerated all of its hair after being murderously shaven off just a short time ago. And I've got a nice facial blemish that, you know, I instead of just editing myself and not being on camera, I figure go ahead and just own it, you know? If anybody out there is worried about how they look, don't ever be worried about how you look. I wanted to talk about one of my most favoritist games of all time. It's an RPG, of course, that gets just about everything it could possibly do right. By RPG, I mean it's one that tries to have everything included. It's got combat, it's got gathering, it's got crafting, it's got side quests, it's got mounts, it's got pets, it has housing, it has exploration, it has optional end game stuff, it's got skill points, it's got regrowth, character creation, and you can even respec. I think I said regrowth. Respec is the correct term, and you can change your appearance later. This game is only on the Nintendo 3DS, but it has flavor win after flavor win, and it's just one of the greatest RPGs I've ever played, and one of the greatest RPGs I think I ever will play. So I don't think personally, for me, there's a video that does it justice, and I don't think that I'm going to do it justice today, except for the rave review that I'm giving it. But I am talking about Fantasy Life. Fantasy Life is one of the greatest RPGs ever made. We're not talking like in terms of awesome, mind-blowing, cutting-edge story or awesome, mind-blowing, cutting-edge technology. It is, at its core, an RPG that you can I play this like backwards while I try to present it? It's an RPG. You have all kinds of places that you can go to, 3 main biomes that make up the core game. Why did I say biomes? 3 main areas made up of 3 or 4 sub-areas each. The important thing here is it's extremely cozy, frustration-free. It's just, I could go on and on and on about this game. It even has a sort of relationship system in the friendship system. And what that is you choose a class, which you can multi-class. You can have every class in the game be a top rank on one character if you want, which is super, super important to me. It's one of my favorite features of any game that offers classing. And you go around, as you level up in that class, as you rank up rather, you will acquire new friends in the storyline of that class. And these friends are just NPCs, but basically, as you level or rank up, those people will be able to join you on your quest. And you can go up and you can just recruit these people who are standing around town to go adventure with you. And there's nothing in the game that requires that you have to have these friends until you get into that end game meta content. But it's just wonderful to be able to acquire these like 50 different NPCs. I could be wildly off with that number. There could be only like 30 or something, but it's a significant amount of people that you can have join your team. And as you run around with them and you level up, they sort of, they don't level up traditionally with you. Rather, when they join your team, they'll be at the same level that you're at. And so as they level up, not only will their stats and things get better, they'll have slightly better AI. They'll actually make smarter decisions in battle. And it's awesome. It even has multiplayer, so you can play with a friend, and they can run around with you, and you can both run around and quest together in your world or in theirs. It's amazing. It's just amazing, and it gets almost every single decision that it could possibly make right. So when Level 5, the developer of this game, and by the way, it was published by Square Enix, kind of closed its doors in the West, putting any sort of hope for a sequel to Fantasy Life or any more Yokai Watch games to a halt, a lot of us fans were worried. We were pretty sad. We were like, oh no, what's gonna be the future of Fantasy Life? Well, Fantasy Life Online exists. Fantasy Life Online is a mobile game, which that term would have me running already, that is based on an existing IP. So, okay, you've got my attention now. And there are microtransactions, so I'm running again. But that's kind of typical of a mobile game, right? I'm not going to justify it or defend it, but it is typical of a mobile game. If you're going to play a mobile game, you probably have microtransactions, right? I decided to try it out and play it. I was not able to play it because it was Japanese, and even though I had the means to download and play Japanese ROMs, I couldn't understand it, not ROMs, APKs on my Android device. I could not understand it well enough to do anything, and Fantasy Life is very menu heavy, very text heavy. Yes, there's a lot of adventuring, there's a lot of running around, but when you convert that to a mobile experience, there's going to be tutorials, there's going to be a lot of hand-holding, there's going to be a lot of gacha mechanics, and you can't ever tell what you need to do versus what you have to do to advance in that context. So I didn't try, I didn't get any further, even though there were some guides and things like that available. As fortune would have it, as fate would intervene, Boltrend Games acquired Fantasy Life Online and breathed life into it so that it could happen here in the West and continue. Fantasy Life Online is more or less a mobile version of one of the greatest RPGs that I have ever played. I mean, Fantasy Life itself is definitely like in the top 3 of games for me, with Final Fantasy XIV occupying a spot up there somewhere. Fantasy Life Online has a serious set of pros that go very well with how the game Fantasy Life feels and is and acts and mechanically plays, and a set of cons that you'll have to overlook if you want to experience Fantasy Life, if you want to continue experiencing Fantasy Life in this updated environment. This is the footage that I have been showing this entire time. This is actually from the Fantasy Life Online mobile game. It's free to play. You don't need to spend a single red cent to do anything as far as progress the story, play the game, level up all of the lives. You can do whatever you want. However, there are definitely other characters who can join your team, NPCs, and if you want these characters or you want the really special 5-star weapons and things like that, and I think the gear actually is the only thing, just the 5-star special gear, and these characters like the Prince of Al-Majik Daemon, you will have to purchase or otherwise acquire an in-game currency called diamonds. And this is one of the cons, because for a lot of people, you know, while the mobile game studio and development industry has got to survive and thrive somehow so that they can continue to make awesome content and acquire games like Fantasy Life and keep them going for an online audience, it's still going to be a turnoff for some people. I myself have spent very, very little money on this game, and it has just about everything that Fantasy Life on the 3DS has. There's only a few minor differences, but they are almost offset by the positive differences, so we're going to go into that. For those of you who don't know anything about Fantasy Life Online, it's a bit of a clunky experience, if I'm being honest. It is a clunky experience compared to Fantasy Life. Fantasy Life has an open world where each new section gets unlocked as you complete the MSQ. It kind of spirals out. Then you've got all of these different zones and areas that you have access to, and you can run around and you can go into the dungeons, which are all optional, except for the very few that are required by the story, and fight a sort of boss who will not appear again after that story point is over. And you can go through the entire game as, say, a crafting class, like a weaver, or I think they're called tailors, actually, or a blacksmith, or a chef. You don't have to be a warrior clad in all plate mail armor, or a mage with level 9 Staff of Fire, anything like that. You can do that stuff. for sure, but you don't have to. It's just a much cozier experience than that. One of the cons that Fantasy Life Online has would definitely be that there is this currency system in place. And it's not a con in and of itself just because it's a currency, although that I'm sure that there's a lot of people who will say, yeah, that is a con. We don't like microtransactions. We don't like those MTXs. That's fine. I don't either. That's why I've only spent like $3 or $4 on this for the RNG, for the loot box mechanic, because I really thought some of the NPCs were cute and I wanted to acquire them for my team, and I got lucky and got a few. It's just a problem because typically in mobile games there are so many different currencies. You've got diamonds, you've got gems, you've got coins. You can spend some of these in-game, and then you've got like Stardust points in this as well. But the good news is you can still acquire those NPCs by just spending the Stardust. So exactly how you get Stardust, I still haven't gotten in-depth enough to understand all of the, I can't call them end-game features and mechanics because they're all introduced pretty early on. And that's kind of one of the other cons. It's a mobile game constantly throwing information at you. Even if you were a Fantasy Life master, seeing it presented in this context and with all of these added mechanics, it can get a little bit overwhelming. So there's menus everywhere, there's icons all over the screen, and the original FL just doesn't have all this. You've got Summon, you've got the Starlight Garden, you've got all of these different events. You've got draws? What does all of this mean? It's a lot. And even traversing the map can be a little bit confusing at first because in the regular Fantasy Life, you don't really have like a fast travel other than being able to fast travel to your house or to your life master. And you can have several houses, which really speeds up the travel system. But by then, you've really, really earned it. I mean, it's not something you just unlock. You have to spend a crap load of dosh in order to acquire houses in the original Fantasy Life. But in this game, you are able to kind of fast travel to different points because you're able to start in that area so that you can complete the contextual side quest or the job quest or whatever it is you would like to call it to get through your missions that you have in that area, either for your life quests or for your main story quest. I will say that you can go through and basically travel organically through every area. You can leave out of one road and appear into the zone that's adjacent, just like in the original FL, if you go to exploration mode, and this works beautifully. This is amazing, awesome, I love it. Although one of the major cons for me is that you cannot travel to Castel, Port Puerto, or Almagique directly. These towns are completely inaccessible in Fantasy Life Online at this time, and so are the subquests within them. Exploration mode is the closest thing that we're going to get to a Fantasy Life port, at least today. Exploration mode plays, looks, and feels just like Fantasy Life. It's got the exact same areas. We have a huge update in textures. All of these textures are easily 4 times the size of the textures used in the DS game. And we've even got some special enemies that are roaming around the map this time, so that you've got a little bit more variation as you continue to play. You can still stop at mining nodes, such as rocks or trees that you can chop down, or even fishing spots. And on the fly, you can stop what you're doing and mine or fish or chop as you please at your leisure. You can also go around and just grind for materials. You can just farm the area for the different materials that each of the enemies offers. And when you've cleared the area, you can run into Haniwa Cave or up north to the Elderwood or northeast to Snow Peak and continue on there, just like in the original Fantasy Life. One of the cons, now, if I can take a turn with the cons, is that you are limited to the sort of mobile interface in terms of controls. So there's going to be a lot of tapping and swiping. Yes, the 3DS is very much a tap, drag, stylus type system, but the 3DS uses the buttons and the D-pad as well as the touchscreen in order for you to navigate Reveria and play Fantasy Life. So it's no real contest. It's definitely more limiting on a mobile device. That said, I think they did their best to give you the full range of moves and everything that you would do in Fantasy Life. It's a little less intuitive, but it's still all very doable. It's all there. Look, we've got a nap dragon. And look, we're going to run by and just let it nap, because if we wake it up, it will eat us all. whole. You still have access to your bag, which has quick slots, and you can use items with a single touch, such as your HP and SP potions. We get to one of the pros. When you walk up to an NPC, you'll get a beautiful little cutscene with your character and the NPC shown in detail. So you actually get to see a lot more of these characters than you used to, and they've all been updated in terms of texture and poly count, so you're seeing nicer versions of these characters. There are some changes to some of the maps too, so if you wanted to see some new life breathed into Riveria, you'll have all kinds of new places to explore in the familiar territory. Like here's Pam's shop in the East Grassy Plains. This was not something that you could find in original Fantasy Life. Now another comparison I want to make is like neither really a pro or a con. It kind of depends on how you look at it. For me personally, it's more of a con because I like how the original game does it, but you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a con for everybody, I recognize. So like in Fantasy Life, you can take down one of these strong monsters and you'll receive a bounty, which is in the form of a sort of crate or box, which you will then carry behind you. While you're carrying the bounty, you are not able to do two things. In Fantasy Life, you have three forms of movement. You can walk, run, or sneak. And running and sneaking are good ways to mitigate enemy detection. But while you have a bounty behind you, you cannot run and you cannot sneak. You can only walk at a normal pace. And this is important for two reasons. One, enemies can now see you, catch up to you, possibly attack you. And two, they will attempt to attack the crate that you are carrying. Enemies will actually attack your bounty, and your bounty has its own amount of HP, and if that HP gets to 0, your bounty is destroyed. It disappears. You do not get to go turn it in. In Fantasy Life, that's a challenge. That's something that I like. I like the challenge of taking down a bounty, such as a hard enemy, or a large tree, or a huge mining spot, or a fishing spot, and then trying to navigate my way back to the beginning of a given area or dungeon so that I can get to a bounty clerk. In Fantasy Life Online, this does not exist. You take an enemy down and you just get the crate. It goes into your invisible hammer space pocket. Hammer space is a term that my wife uses. I don't know if anybody else does. It's like Bugs Bunny pulls the giant hammer out of where? It's hammer space. It's like a Pokeball. But you get to keep your bounties in Fantasy Life Online. You just take down the enemies and then you leave exploration mode and the bounties are yours. It's cool because it's like a frustration-free mechanic. It's just, I actually liked the challenge of the old way. Now here's a pro. In Fantasy Life Online, you get to choose how your characters grow. Not only yourself with skill points, but the NPCs that can join your team. They've all got skill trees and you get to pick which thing that they'll learn next. Here on the screen, you'll see that the characters also have their own artwork, which is really, really nice. I really like that's a very nice touch. Euelia is friggin' adorable here. Whoever did Euelia's artwork, you did a perfect job. And then you've got Olivia, who is just great. So here's the skill tree. It's likely that you're going to earn the skill points just to unlock everything in a given tier before you even advance the next tier. So it's not like it's a super strategic thing. You're probably just going to be able to unlock everything, and that's totally fine. It's not really that kind of game where you need to pay very close attention to any kind of meta. There's not really like a meta in Fantasy Life. You just have fun, which is kind of like amazingly the point. Look at my crew though. My crew is awesome. I love them. In Fantasy Life Online, you get to eat food. You don't have to pay for this. You earn food with different things that happen and go on, and you earn EXP orbs, and they have the same effect. You will use them on your character and you will get experience points. It's not the only way at all to earn experience. You earn experience like you do any other time, through crafting, through fighting, through gathering, all of that stuff. You just get EXP and you level that way. But you can also eat food, which boosts your EXP gain frequency like super fast. You can easily level 20 times with one experience orb. So if you don't want to grind your lives out, you can select a new life, use your EXP times 50k or something, and you'll immediately jump like 12 levels. I mean, it's crazy. It's not what I would call a pro myself. I like being able to just level organically, but because I don't have to use it, it's not a con either. It's just there in case you need it. Fantasy Life does housing in a way that I love, because you get to own a house like in 6 different areas in the game once you count the DLC. If you don't count the DLC, you still get to earn 3 houses. And in the first area, Castel, you have one of like 4 houses to choose from. And you can sell that house and go get a different house. So you've got 6 or 7 houses right there in the base game before you even get the Origin Island DLC. I don't know how housing is going to work in Fantasy Life Online. I can obviously see that I have a house, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to populate this area down here, this grassy field, with more houses. And oh, that would be another pro for Fantasy Life Online. Fantasy Life Online has this giant open grassy area filled with trees and rocks. And you get to build things here. You get to build places. You'll, over time, earn these plushling assistants and these special items that you may or may not have to buy to give to your plushling assistants so that they can chop down the trees and mine the rocks and clear up this field so that you can place more buildings. And the buildings will act as facilities so that you can have crafting and things be automated. It's pretty cool because you don't have to do this, and also it's something that Fantasy Life Original doesn't have. So it's a pretty cool additional feature that they've given us. And while you're down here, you'll see all of your NPCs that you've earned so far running around down here. So earlier I mentioned diamonds. Diamonds is like one of the main currencies of the online game. It's one of the ways that you earn your characters and gear. Obviously you can start as the character that you create, and you don't have to have these helper characters, and the story will actually give you NPCs that are contextual to the story during certain points. But diamonds are something that you can spend to get more characters, and it's not cheap to buy the diamonds, in my opinion. Everybody can have their own opinion about that, and that's totally fine, but it is actually pretty easy to just earn the diamonds for free. And here's where I want to tell you about my code, kindly provided to me by Boltrend Games. If you enter FLOXASH, you will get 60 free diamonds as well as 3 Genesis relics. That's all you have to do. You can share the code with your friends. Everybody gets this. And I want to thank Boltrend Games for naming a code for me in my honor. If you haven't used Flow X AmalgamAsh, that one may still be valid. That one was valid several months ago. You may still be able to use it. That should get you 40 diamonds. And it got you something else, but I'm so sorry that I cannot remember what it was that it gave you. So this is one of the current events that's going on. Whenever they do an event, they will usually start it with a sort of story quest, and you normally don't really have to do anything except read the story to get the flavor of it, to get the flavor text, the why am I doing this sort of part of the story. And after you complete this part, you will be able to access the raid content, as I like to call it. So I won't spoil this one for you. This one you can undertake as soon as the recommended level is 20. So there's Uelia being adorable. There's Teruha being very interesting. Finish that and you'll get access to the first version of a given, what do they call these? Urgent Crusades. They're basically like trials in Final Fantasy. I think they call them trials in ESO as well. But you have some of these will have like waves of enemies, and some of them will just be bosses, and some of them will be areas where there's a boss in each section. And you've got different things that you can say as a greeting, and you can use different emotes when you are teamed up and in the game. You can also tackle these solo if you think you're strong enough. Here I'm about to do the level 20, recommended level 20 beginner wrapped in wind challenge as a level 40, whatever I am right now. I'm doing it all by myself, and this challenge was really fun to do because it's like timed. As you can see, I've got 10 minutes to do it, and you can fly through these if you've got 3 or 4 over leveled characters. But this was a lot of fun because it was like, instead of having enemy mobs, you've got trees, and you've got to chop the trees down. Now, some of the trees summon enemy mobs because that's just how this particular story goes, but that's a riot, and this one was a blast. I loved it. And at the end, of course, you get your treasures, and RNG, they could be really rare things, they could be just some worthless things you'll never pay attention to or you'll want to sell, and you'll get Dosh and experience, lovely Dosh and experience. All hail Dawson experience. Alright, so one of the last things I'm going to do on camera here is use one of my 10-time summons. It costs 400 diamonds, and I had about 1,200, a little over, when I was filming this particular video. So I get to summon 10 characters. So characters that you summon come in 3 flavors, and they're represented by the different sort of appearances of those stars. You've got 3 stars, 4 stars, and 5 stars. And the 3 stars are basically all the same characters that join you on your quests in the original Fantasy Life. They're the NPCs from the different life chains. And the 4 stars are the very notable characters. 5 stars are very special. The 5 stars are the ones who, a lot of them are not in original Fantasy Life. Like, I don't think Grants here was in original Fantasy Life. I think he's new. But then characters like Olivia and Damon and Euelia are 5-star summons, so you have to spend some money or some diamonds in order to roll for those characters. Now, Fantasy Life does what I think has become typical in MMO, or rather mobile games, and that is allow you to get a 100% chance of getting a particular character, a featured character, if you do it enough times. It's like right here, if you use this 11 times, you'll get a guaranteed Damon summon. And I'd love to have that, because Damon's awesome. So I might see about summoning multiple times, but there's another thing that you can do, and that is spend Stardust in order to purchase that character. And every time you get a character that you already have, well, they'll level up. But when they reach max level and you roll and you get the same character again, they will obtain a Stardust stone, and you can change that in for Stardust points. It gets a little bit convoluted. I think it took me a while to understand, but I'm kind of slow anyway. But the Stardust points will allow you to buy NPCs that are 5-star, so you can just obtain them that way. It's still very time consuming, and it still takes a lot of resources, so I'm not sure that I would see that as a pro, but you don't have to do it, so it's hard to complain about it. But I want all the characters, and I don't want to have to pay for them through RNG. Oh well, what are you gonna do? So I'm gonna try, for the last thing on this video, the Holy Tower, which is an event that it increases in difficulty with every floor, not by too much. You can do it in a team or by yourself. I foolishly chose to do this completely solo and not even pull in my NPCs, and it's just waves of enemies and bosses. So a bit like a small raid. This was a lot of fun to do. Again, it's easy to mistap and you'll go flying back in sort of a parry or dodge instead of charging forward and walking, but that is what it is. I just got to get better at using Android touchscreen action game controls, you know? Anyway, there is a ton of stuff to do in Fantasy Life Online. I will probably continue playing it until I've gotten the story down, and then I'll see how rewarding each of the jobs I haven't played yet are. I still have a lot to do in Classic Fantasy Life since my save got wiped sometime last year. If I have to choose between the two, I'm probably gonna go with the offline one. But I have to say, Fantasy Life Online plays clean, it looks clean, definitely scratches the itch if it's Fantasy Life you crave. There's not really any other alternative that's going to do that for you. So anyway, this ended up being a weird sort of amalgamation of a review and also kind of an overview and also a pro and con comparison. But I wanted to talk about it because one, Fantasy Life is one of my favorite games of all time. It is one of the just best. I've already said it like a million times in the video. So far, it's been worth every second of time that I've poured into it, so I really don't have anything to complain about. Maybe Boltrend could allow us to pay a monthly subscription, an optional business model in addition to the one they have now, in which we just get the characters, every new character that releases and every weapon and item, and we don't have to rely on RNG. We just get them because we pay a flat monthly rate. That is something I might be down for. So I think that's something that online mobile game developers could and maybe should look into. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. So I'm out of time. Thank you very much for your time, and check out Fantasy Life. And if you want to add me as a friend on here, go ahead. I'm AmalgamAsh, big surprise, and I'm happy to send you hearts and smileys every day that I log on so that you can obtain free bonus items, because that's a thing that I didn't talk about. I guess you gotta discover some of this for yourself. All right, Ash out. Have a great day. See you tomorrow. Bye for now.